The city was still half asleep. Early morning fog drifted through narrow streets, softening the edges of buildings and streetlights. Delivery trucks rolled slowly through intersections. A bakery door opened somewhere in the distance. The smell of fresh bread rose quietly into the cold air. Above that bakery, in a small rented room, a man opened his eyes. The room was simple. A narrow bed, a wooden chair beside a small table, a Bible resting beneath a dim yellow lamp. Nothing about the room suggested wealth. Nothing about the room suggested power. And yet the man sitting up on that bed was known in boardrooms, conferences, and churches across the country. His name was Daniel Hartwell. To the public, Daniel Hartwell was a billionaire entrepreneur, a philanthropist, the founder of one of the fastest growing church networks in the nation. But this morning, none of those things mattered. Because this morning, Daniel Hartwell was preparing to disappear. He stood slowly and walked toward the chair beside the bed. Folded, there was a pile of clothing that did not belong to the man the world recognized. Torn jeans, worn sandals, a faded coat with a sleeve beginning to fray at the cuff. Daniel studied the clothes quietly. He picked up the coat first, feeling the rough fabric between his fingers. Then he looked down at the table beside the Bible. There, resting in the yellow light, was something completely different. A gold watch, elegant, heavy, impossible to mistake for anything other than expensive. Daniel removed the watch from his wrist and placed it on the table. For a moment he simply stared at it. The watch had been a gift years earlier from the board of his company. They had called it a symbol of success. But today it would become something else. A boundary. Daniel opened the drawer beneath the table and placed the watch inside. The drawer slid shut with a soft wooden click. Success had just been locked away. He pulled on the torn jeans, buttoned the faded coat. Then he walked to the window and opened it slightly. Cold air filled the room. Daniel reached down toward the dusty floor and rubbed his hands against it. Dust settled across his fingers, across his palms, across the sleeves of his coat. From the outside, the transformation would now look convincing. From the inside, nothing had changed. Behind him, the Bible still rested on the table. Daniel returned to it and opened the cover slowly. Inside the front page, written in uneven ink, was a sentence he had read hundreds of times. The handwriting belonged to his father. Never trust a church that loves the rich more than the broken. Daniel traced the sentence once with his finger. His father had not been wealthy. He had been a traveling pastor who drove a second-hand car from town to town, preaching in churches that rarely had more than 50 people. But he had understood something many successful churches forgot. People reveal their hearts most clearly when they believe no one important is watching. Daniel closed the Bible. He spoke quietly into the empty room. The truth about people only appears when they believe you have nothing to give them. Today would test that belief again. For months, a church across the city had been asking him to become their new pastor. Grace Covenant Church. They had written letters, called his office, sent invitations. They believed Daniel Hartwell could bring growth, influence, prestige. But Daniel had learned long ago that the welcome prepared for a powerful man was rarely the same welcome offered to a powerless one. So he had decided something unusual. He would visit them twice, once as someone important, and once as someone invisible. Daniel slipped his feet into the worn sandals and reached for the doorknob. The hallway outside smelled faintly of flour and warm bread. He stepped into the corridor and closed the door behind him. This morning he would walk into Grace Covenant Church as a beggar, and no one would know the test had already begun. Cut across the city, Grace Covenant Church was wide awake. Cars filled the parking lot. Voices echoed across the front steps. Inside the building, people hurried between rooms carrying decorations, coffee trays, and boxes of pastries. Excitement moved through the building like electricity. A long banner stretched across the entrance doors. Welcome our new pastor. Bright letters. Perfect spacing. A message carefully designed to look warm and inviting. But even inside the building, No one knew exactly who the new pastor would be. They only knew one thing. He was important. In the fellowship hall, 3 people stood near a long table covered with paper programs and name tags. They spoke quietly, but everyone around them listened. Elder Marcus Caldwell adjusted the cuffs of his suit jacket. Marcus was the kind of man who believed appearances mattered. He managed several local businesses, sat on multiple community boards, and had spent the last 10 years quietly guiding the direction of the church. Across from him stood Deacon Harold Pierce. Harold had a permanent expression of concern, the kind worn by men who spent their lives protecting reputations. Beside them stood Sister Lorraine. Lorraine knew everything that happened in the church, and most things that did not. Marcus leaned slightly closer to the others. I heard the board chose someone very influential. Harold nodded. Some say he leads several churches already. Lorraine lowered her voice. Someone told me he owns businesses too. Marcus smiled at that. That is exactly what we need. Harold folded his arms. A pastor who understands success. Lorraine nodded slowly. And someone who attracts the right kind of people. Marcus said the next words carefully. Respectable people. Across the room, someone laughed loudly. Coffee machines hissed. Chairs scraped across the floor. Grace Covenant Church had spent the entire week preparing for the arrival of their new leader. They wanted the first impression to be perfect. Outside the front windows, morning sunlight was beginning to cut through the fog. Harold glanced toward the entrance. Something outside caught his attention. A man was sleeping on the wooden bench near the front steps. His coat looked thin. His shoes were worn nearly flat. Harold frowned. He tapped Marcus on the arm and pointed through the glass. Marcus followed his gaze. Neither man spoke for a moment. Then Harold sighed. We cannot have that right in front of the door today. Marcus nodded once. Find the janitor. Ask him to move the man along. Lorraine folded her arms and looked back at the banner above the entrance. Welcome our new pastor. Inside the sanctuary, ushers arranged in books neatly across the pews. The front row had been carefully prepared. One seat in the center had been reserved. A small card rested on the cushion. Pastor. The seat remained empty. Outside the church doors, a man in torn jeans walked slowly along the sidewalk. His coat moved lightly in the cold wind. Dust clung to his sleeves. He stopped when he reached the entrance steps. Above him, the banner moved gently in the breeze. Welcome our new pastor. Daniel Hartwell looked up at the words. Then he lowered his eyes and walked toward the door. Inside the building, people practiced warm smiles. Outside the building, the test had already begun, and neither world knew yet who would soon be sitting in the front row. The church doors opened slowly. Cold morning air drifts inside as people begin to file through the entrance. Some carry Bibles. Some carry coffee cups. Most carry quiet expectations. Grace Covenant Church had spent the entire week preparing for the arrival of their new pastor. But the man stepping through the doorway now is not the man they are expecting. His coat is worn. His jeans are torn at the knee. Dust clings to the sleeves like a memory that refuses to wash away. Daniel Hartwell pauses just inside the entrance. For a moment he simply observes. The way conversations slow when people notice him. The way smiles tighten. The way eyes glance once and then look away. It is a small shift in atmosphere. But Daniel has spent years learning how to notice small shifts. Because small shifts reveal large truths. He steps farther inside. And as he walks down the aisle, another film begins playing quietly in his mind. A memory. Another church. Another morning. Another man. His father. Daniel had not been born into wealth. The house he grew up in had thin walls and a kitchen table that rocked slightly when anyone leaned on it. His father was a traveling pastor. Not famous. Not influential. Just a quiet man who believed faith was meant to be practiced in ordinary places. Daniel remembers long car rides between small towns. Church buildings with peeling paint. Congregations where 30 people felt like a full house. His father never complained about the lack of money. But he noticed something else. One evening, when Daniel was 12 years old, his father had said something during dinner that never left him. Faith without compassion is performance. Daniel had asked what that meant. His father answered with a tired smile. It means people are very good at loving God in public, and very bad at loving strangers in private. The memory fades as Daniel walks farther into the sanctuary. Rows of polished wooden pews stretch across the room. Sunlight slips through stained glass windows. Everything looks warm. Everything looks welcoming. Until Daniel reaches the first open seat. A woman sitting near the aisle glances at him. Then she places her purse gently on the empty space beside her. The message is quiet, but unmistakable. That seat is no longer available. Daniel nods politely and continues walking. Across the room, a group of men near the front row watch him approach. One of them adjusts his jacket. Another spreads his arm along the back of the pew. A silent barrier. Daniel turns slightly and continues down the aisle. No anger crosses his face. Only observation. Because this is the moment he came for. Cut across the sanctuary. In the fellowship hall, behind the main room, Marcus Caldwell stands beside a table reviewing the morning schedule. Marcus believes in preparation. He believes in order. And most of all, he believes in image. The church has been declining slowly for the past 3 years. Attendance down. Donations shrinking. Young families quietly leaving for churches that feel newer, more exciting. Marcus taps the printed schedule with his finger. Today needs to change that. Deacon Harold Pierce approaches him carrying a clipboard. Everything is ready. Marcus nods. The banner is up. The welcome speech is prepared. Harold lowers his voice. I still wish the board had told us exactly who this pastor is. Marcus smiles slightly. The mystery is part of the excitement. Lorraine joins them, holding a tray of name tags. I heard he owns several companies. Marcus raises an eyebrow. Even better. Harold leans closer. Imagine what someone like that could do for this church. Lorraine glances toward the sanctuary doors. Someone successful attracts successful people. Marcus nods slowly. That is exactly what we need. Respectable people. In the sanctuary, Daniel reaches the center section of pews. He spots another empty seat. For a moment, it looks promising. But before he can sit, the man at the end of the row places a Bible carefully on the cushion. Saved. The word is never spoken. It does not need to be. Daniel pauses. Then he continues walking toward the back. His footsteps echo softly across the wooden floor. Behind him, conversations resume. But they resume differently now. Quieter. More cautious. A whisper passes between two women near the middle row. Why would someone like that come here? Another voice answers softly. Some people just wander into places they do not belong. The words drift through the sanctuary like smoke. Daniel hears them. He does not react. Because the phrase is not new to him. Some people belong. Some people do not. He had heard the same words many years ago. Not inside a church, but outside one. Daniel was 14 when he first saw a man turned away from a congregation because his clothes were dirty. The memory stayed with him longer than the sermon that day. The church doors had closed, and his father had whispered quietly beside him. Some churches forget who they are supposed to open those doors for. Back in the present, Daniel finally reaches the last row. One seat remains empty. No purses. No jackets. No Bibles marking territory. He sits down slowly. From here, the entire sanctuary is visible. Every face. Every whisper. Every quiet judgment. Across the building, Marcus Caldwell walks through the side door into the sanctuary. He pauses near the aisle and scans the room with satisfaction. Everything looks orderly. Everything looks appropriate. Exactly the kind of atmosphere a distinguished pastor would appreciate. Then Marcus notices the man in the back row. The torn coat. The dusty sleeves. For a moment Marcus studies him from across the room. Then he turns slightly toward Harold. We should keep an eye on that one. Harold follows his gaze. His expression tightens. Yes. Probably just passing through. Marcus straightens his jacket. Well, let us hope he does not stay long. In the back row, Daniel sits quietly with his hands folded, watching, listening, waiting. Because in one part of the room, a church is preparing to welcome a powerful leader. And in another part of the same room, that leader is already sitting among them, invisible, for now. The sanctuary grows quieter as the final people settle into their seats. Morning light pours through the stained glass windows and spreads slowly across the wooden floor. The room smells faintly of polished wood and fresh coffee. From a distance, everything looks peaceful, ordered, welcoming. But inside that calm surface, something else is beginning to show. In the back row, Daniel Hartwell sits quietly with his hands folded. From here, he can see the entire room. Rows of people leaning toward one another. Soft whispers. Carefully practiced smiles. A church preparing itself for something important. Daniel shifts slightly in his seat. He had walked the entire length of the sanctuary to reach this place. Not because he wanted the back row, but because every other seat had quietly disappeared. A purse placed beside one woman like a polite wall. A folded jacket stretched across another bench. A Bible resting in the center of a row like a silent reservation. Every obstacle had been small, almost invisible, and yet together they had created a message that was impossible to misunderstand. Some people belong, some people do not. Daniel rests his elbow on the wooden bench and studies the congregation. A young couple near the middle row leans together laughing softly. Two elderly men near the front compare notes in matching leather Bibles. Across the aisle, a woman glances toward the back. For half a second her eyes meet Daniel's. Then she looks away. The smile on her face fades just slightly. Daniel notices that too. Because noticing is the purpose of today. He reaches into the pocket of his coat and removes a small notebook. The cover is plain. The pages nearly empty. He opens it slowly. One page already holds a single sentence written earlier that morning. The truth about people appears when they believe you have nothing to offer. Daniel taps the edge of the notebook with his pen. Then he looks up again. Near the front of the sanctuary, movement begins. The guest preacher walks toward the pulpit carrying a worn Bible. Conversations fade. The room straightens itself. Voices lower. Grace Covenant Church has begun its Sunday service. The preacher clears his throat and smiles warmly. Good morning, everyone. A wave of polite greetings moves across the room. Good morning. The preacher nods and opens the Bible slowly. Today, we will be talking about a story many of you know well. A story about compassion, about mercy, about how we treat the stranger. Daniel lifts his eyes slightly. The preacher continues. The parable of the Good Samaritan. A quiet murmur of recognition moves through the congregation. The preacher begins reading. A traveler beaten and left beside the road. Two religious men who pass by without stopping. Then a Samaritan who chooses to help when no one else will. The story unfolds calmly, familiar, comforting. But from the back row, Daniel listens differently. Because the sermon is describing a moment that has already happened. Just a few minutes earlier, the preacher looks up from the Bible and speaks with energy. Let me ask you something. If someone in need walked through these doors today, would we help them? A few heads nod. Someone in the front row speaks first. Amen. The word spreads quickly across the sanctuary. Amen. Amen. Daniel watches the room. Every voice confident. Every expression sincere. He lowers his eyes toward the notebook again. Then he writes a single word on the page. Observation. The pen stops moving. The room continues responding to the sermon. But Daniel already knows the answer to the preacher's question. Cut across the building. Behind the sanctuary, in a quiet office near the fellowship hall, Marcus Caldwell studies a printed speech. He reads each sentence slowly, adjusting words in his mind. The welcome speech must feel polished, impressive, appropriate for the kind of leader they expect to arrive later that afternoon. Harold Pierce stands near the window reviewing a seating chart. Lorraine moves back and forth across the room, arranging name tags. Each of them moves with the nervous energy of people preparing for an important guest. Marcus lowers the paper slightly. Do you think the crowd will be large enough today? Harold glances toward the sanctuary doors. It should be. Word has spread that the new pastor will be here. Lorraine places the final name tag on the table. People are curious. Marcus smiles. Good. Curiosity fills seats. Harold studies the seating chart again. The front row must remain open. Marcus nods. Of course. That seat is reserved. Reserved for the pastor. Lorraine glances briefly toward the sanctuary window. From here, she can see the back rows faintly through the glass. Her eyes pause on the man sitting alone in the last pew. The torn coat. The dusty sleeves. She turns back toward Marcus. That man in the back. Marcus looks up. What about him? Lorraine shrugs slightly. He does not look like the kind of person we want visitors noticing today. Harold nods quietly. People who look successful inspire confidence. Lorraine folds her arms. People like him do the opposite. Marcus walks toward the door and glances briefly through the small window into the sanctuary. His eyes land on Daniel in the back row. For a moment, he studies the scene. Then he steps away. Well, let us focus on welcoming the right people. Back in the sanctuary, the sermon continues. The preacher speaks passionately about kindness, about helping strangers, about loving people who have nothing to give in return. From the back row, Daniel watches the congregation carefully. Some people nod. Some whisper agreement. A few even wipe their eyes. The words are beautiful. But the memory of the empty seats still lingers in the room. Like a quiet echo, Daniel closes the notebook and slips it back into his pocket. Across the sanctuary, Marcus re-enters through the side door. He stands near the aisle, observing the congregation with satisfaction. The service is running smoothly. Everything appears proper, orderly, respectable. Exactly the kind of atmosphere a distinguished pastor would appreciate. Then his eyes drift toward the back row again, toward the man sitting alone. For a moment Marcus feels a small ripple of concern, but he pushes the thought away. Today is about the future of the church, about growth, about strength. In the back row, Daniel watches the congregation with equal focus. Two men in the same room, two very different evaluations taking place. Marcus judging who belongs. Daniel judging what kind of church this truly is. Neither man speaks. Neither man understands yet how much power the other holds. But the test has already begun, and both sides are quietly reaching the same conclusion. Something is not quite right here. Marcus worries the church may not attract the leader it needs. Daniel worries the church may not deserve the leader it wants. And somewhere between those two fears, the collision of both worlds is slowly moving closer. The final hymn fades slowly into silence. People begin standing. Bibles close with soft thuds. Wooden pews creak as the congregation stretches and turns toward one another. Grace Covenant Church shifts from quiet reverence to social warmth in a matter of seconds. Voices rise. Hands shake. Laughter returns to the room. From the back row, Daniel Hartwell remains seated for a moment longer. He watches the room transform. During the service, everyone had faced forward. Now they turn toward the people who matter to them. Friends, families, familiar faces. Daniel stands and slips his notebook back into his coat pocket. Then he walks slowly down the aisle. The same aisle he had walked earlier while searching for a place to sit. The same aisle where every empty seat had quietly vanished. Now the sanctuary doors stand open, and the smell of food drifts in from the fellowship hall. Lunch has begun. Cut across the building. The fellowship hall buzzes with energy. Long folding tables stretch across the room. Plates of food line the counters. Volunteers move between trays and pitchers of iced tea. People gather in small groups. The atmosphere feels warm, inviting, but warmth has direction, and direction has limits. Daniel steps into the hall quietly. No one stops him. No one greets him either. He moves toward the first open table. Several people are already seated there. As Daniel reaches for the empty chair, a man at the end of the table lifts his hand slightly. "Sorry, these seats are taken." Daniel pauses. He nods politely and steps back. He moves toward another table near the center of the room. A group of women sits together, laughing over plates of food. One chair remains open. Daniel approaches slowly. Before he can sit, one of the women leans forward. "Sorry, we are saving that seat." Daniel nods again. The smile on his face remains calm. But the message is familiar now. Some people belong. Some people do not. He turns and walks toward a smaller table near the back wall. 2 empty chairs sit there. Hope flickers for a moment. Then a young man quickly places his jacket across one of the chairs. Someone is sitting there. Daniel stops walking. For a moment the room seems louder. Forks clinking against plates. Conversations overlapping. The sound of belonging. He moves to the final table in the corner. Only one chair remains. Daniel sits down. Across the room people laugh. Conversations overlap like waves. But here in the corner the air feels slightly colder. Daniel folds his hands and looks down at the table. He had expected this possibility. Still, expectation does not soften the feeling. For several minutes he sits quietly. No one approaches. No one asks his name. No one asks where he came from. Then footsteps stop beside the table. Daniel looks up. A young woman stands there holding 2 cups of coffee. Her expression is uncertain but kind. She places 1 cup in front of him. "I noticed you did not have a place to sit." Daniel studies her face. Simple kindness often arrives without ceremony. "Thank you." She pulls out the chair beside him and sits down. "My name is Sarah." "Sarah Bennett." Daniel nods. "Daniel." They sit in silence for a moment. Around them, the fellowship hall continues buzzing with activity. But their small table feels separate from the noise. Sarah takes a sip of coffee. Then she smiles slightly. Some Sundays, this place can feel a little crowded. Daniel glances toward the other tables. Yes, it seems that way. Sarah studies the room for a moment. Then she leans back in her chair. "I have only been coming here a few months." Daniel raises an eyebrow slightly. "And how has that been?" Sarah shrugs gently. "People are friendly. Once they know you." Her words are not bitter, just honest. Daniel nods slowly. They talk quietly for the next 20 minutes. About small things. About work. About the city. Sarah never asks what Daniel does for a living. She never studies his clothes. She never wonders why he arrived alone. Instead, she listens. And Daniel notices something he had not expected to feel today. Hope. Across the room, another conversation unfolds. Marcus Caldwell stands near the kitchen doorway, speaking with Harold and Lorraine. The 3 of them watch the room carefully. Every table filled. Every seat occupied. Attendance looks strong today. Marcus nods with satisfaction. Then Harold approaches, holding his phone. His expression has changed. "Marcus, you might want to see this." Marcus takes the phone. A message from the church board glows on the screen. The new pastor will arrive this afternoon. Excitement moves through the small group instantly. Lorraine leans closer. "Did they say who it is?" Harold shakes his head. "No name yet. But listen to this." He scrolls to the next message. Apparently, he has funded several churches. Marcus raises an eyebrow. "How many?" Harold reads again. "Millions in donations." Lorraine gasps softly. Marcus lowers the phone slowly. "If this man joins us, everything changes." Harold nods. Attendance. Donations. Influence. Lorraine smiles with quiet anticipation. The right kind of leader attracts the right kind of people. Marcus glances out across the fellowship hall again. Then his eyes drift briefly toward the corner table. Toward Daniel and Sarah. The man in the worn coat. The quiet conversation. Marcus looks away. Not the right kind of people. At the small corner table, Sarah finishes her coffee. She looks at Daniel thoughtfully. "Can I say something without sounding strange?" Daniel smiles, faintly. You may try. Sarah gestures lightly around the room. Church should be the safest place for strangers. The sentence lands softly, but Daniel feels it deeply, because decades earlier he had heard almost the same words, spoken by his father. Daniel lowers his eyes for a moment. Then he looks back at Sarah. I believe you are right. Across the hall, Marcus studies the room again. In his mind, he sees the future clearly now. A powerful pastor, a growing congregation, respectable people filling every seat. Back at the corner table, Daniel stands slowly. Thank you for the coffee. Sarah smiles. You are welcome. Daniel turns toward the exit. The afternoon sun shines through the glass doors. Outside, the air feels cool again. He steps onto the sidewalk and walks away from the building. Inside the fellowship hall, Marcus climbs the small stage near the front of the room. He begins arranging the microphone, preparing the space where the new pastor will soon stand. Neither man realizes the truth yet. Daniel walking away from the church. Marcus preparing to welcome the new leader. Two separate moments. Two separate worlds. Moving toward the same collision. 2 hours later, the church fills again. Afternoon sunlight pours through the tall, stained glass windows. Dust particles float slowly through the colored beams of light. The sanctuary feels fuller now. More people, more voices, more expectation. Grace Covenant Church is preparing for an arrival. Rows fill quickly. Families whisper together. Men straighten their jackets. Women smooth the pages of their Bibles. Every eye keeps drifting toward the entrance doors. Because today the church welcomes a new pastor, and rumor has already transformed him into something larger than life. Near the front row, Marcus Caldwell stands beside the pulpit. His suit is crisp, his posture confident, but his fingers adjust the microphone twice, then a third time. Preparation is easy. Moments like this require perfection. Harold Pierce moves between the aisles, quietly guiding late arrivals. Lorraine stands near the front, greeting guests with a practiced smile. Everything must look orderly. Everything must look successful. Marcus glances across the sanctuary. Every seat near the front is full. Respectable faces. Well-dressed families. Exactly the kind of audience a powerful leader should see on his first day. Marcus leans slightly toward Harold. This is good. Harold nods. Very good. Lorraine folds her hands and watches the entrance. I heard he owns several companies. Marcus smiles faintly. Success attracts success. The congregation settles slowly. A quiet tension builds in the room, because everyone knows the moment is close. Marcus steps toward the microphone. The room gradually falls silent. Conversations fade. Chairs stop moving. Every eye turns forward. Marcus clears his throat. Good afternoon, everyone. A gentle response rises from the room. Good afternoon. Marcus pauses briefly. Today is an important day for Grace Covenant Church. He scans the congregation. For months, we have prayed for guidance, for leadership, for someone who can help this church grow into the future. Heads nod across the sanctuary. Marcus lifts his hand slightly toward the entrance. And today, we welcome that leader. A ripple of excitement moves through the crowd. Marcus continues. It is my honor to introduce the new pastor of Grace Covenant Church. Applause begins immediately. Warm, confident, expectant. Marcus gestures toward the sanctuary doors. Please join me in welcoming Pastor Daniel Hartwell. The doors open slowly. The afternoon light spills into the sanctuary. For a moment, the doorway is only brightness. Then a figure appears. Daniel Hartwell steps inside. But he no longer looks like the man who sat in the back row earlier that morning. The worn coat is gone. The dusty sleeves have vanished. Now he wears a tailored dark suit. The fabric fits perfectly. His posture is calm. His expression composed. He walks forward with quiet confidence. At first, the congregation simply applauds. Many of them have never seen the pastor before. To them, he is just another distinguished guest. But the distance between the entrance and the pulpit is not long. and recognition travels faster than footsteps. In the third row, a woman leans slightly toward her husband, her voice barely above a whisper. Wait, I think I have seen him before. Across the aisle, a man narrows his eyes. That face. Something feels familiar. Near the middle row's confusion begins spreading slowly. Because memory is waking up. A few people glance toward the back pews, toward the place where a man in a worn coat had sat quietly during the service. Marcus steps down from the stage and walks toward Daniel, his smile wide, his hand extended. Welcome, Pastor Hartwell. Daniel accepts the handshake calmly. Thank you. The applause continues, but now it begins to soften, because more people are beginning to see clearly. In the fourth row, someone stops clapping entirely. His hands freeze mid-motion. The man in the suit, the man from the back row. They are the same person. The realization spreads like a ripple through water. Gasps begin appearing across the sanctuary. Quiet at first, then louder. Sarah Bennett sits near the center aisle. Her hands rest in her lap. Her eyes follow Daniel as he walks toward the stage. For several seconds, she simply watches, her mind searching for the reason her heart suddenly feels unsteady. Then the truth lands. The man she shared coffee with. The man who sat alone at lunch. The man she had welcomed without question. He is walking beside Marcus, toward the pulpit, toward the microphone. Sarah stops breathing for a moment. Daniel. The name echoes in her mind. Pastor Hartwell. Around her, the congregation is slowly unraveling. Memories flash across faces. The purse placed on an empty seat. The jacket spread across a bench. The quiet refusals at the lunch tables. Sorry, these seats are taken. We are saving that chair. Someone else is sitting here. Every moment returns now. But the meaning has changed. Marcus leads Daniel onto the stage. Neither man rushes. Marcus turns toward the congregation with a proud smile. Allow me to formally welcome our new pastor, Pastor Daniel Hartwell. Applause returns again. But now it sounds different. Less confident. More uncertain. Because the congregation is remembering. Every quiet judgment. Every small rejection. Every moment when the stranger in the worn coat had been measured and dismissed. Daniel steps toward the microphone. For a moment he says nothing. He simply looks out across the sanctuary. His eyes move slowly across the room, from the front rows, to the middle, to the back. The same path he walked earlier that morning. The same room, the same people. But now the roles have reversed. Earlier the church had been observing him. Now he observes the church. Marcus steps slightly aside. The stage belongs to Daniel now. Silence settles across the sanctuary. Heavy, expectant. Daniel places both hands gently on the edges of the pulpit. His voice calm, steady. Thank you for welcoming me today. The congregation listens carefully, because now every word carries weight. Daniel continues. This morning, I visited this church for the first time. Several heads lower slightly. I sat in the back row. A few people close their eyes. Daniel pauses. Then he speaks again. Today, I had the opportunity to observe something important. Across the sanctuary, no one moves. Because everyone knows exactly what he means. The beggar, the billionaire, the pastor, all the same man. And now the church must face the memory of how it treated him. The sanctuary has never been this quiet. Hundreds of people sit in complete stillness. No one shifts in their seat. No one whispers. Even the faint hum of the air vents seems louder now. Because something invisible has just entered the room. Truth. And truth does not rush. It waits. At the front of the sanctuary, Daniel Hartwell stands behind the pulpit. His hands rest lightly on the polished wood. His posture calm. His breathing steady. But his eyes move slowly across the congregation. Not searching. Remembering. Because only a few hours earlier he had walked through the same room as a stranger. Now he stands before them as their pastor. And both versions of the same man are present in the silence. Behind him, Marcus Caldwell stands a few steps back from the microphone. His confident posture from earlier has softened. The smile that once rested easily on his face is gone. Because Marcus understands something now. The moment unfolding in this sanctuary is not a celebration. It is a revelation. Daniel lifts one hand slowly. The movement is small, but it draws every eye in the room. In his palm, he holds two small coins. He places them gently on the podium. The metal touches the wood with a soft sound. The sound echoes more loudly than it should, because the room is holding its breath. Daniel looks at the coins for a moment. Then he raises his eyes again. I visited this church earlier today. His voice is calm, measured. No anger, no accusation, just truth. Across the sanctuary, faces begin to stiffen. Some people stare at the floor. Others watch him with quiet dread. Daniel continues. This morning, I came dressed differently. The words move slowly through the room, like a quiet storm. In the third row, a woman lowers her head. In the back pew, a man shifts uncomfortably. Because now every memory begins returning. The worn coat, the dusty sleeves, the man sitting alone. Daniel rests one hand beside the coins. I walked through the sanctuary searching for a place to sit. His eyes move across the pews again. Several seats were already reserved. He pauses. The word reserved hangs in the air. Across the room, people remember. A purse placed carefully beside a woman. A jacket spread across a bench. A Bible laid across a row like a quiet barrier. Reserved. Daniel continues gently. Eventually, I found a place in the back. Marcus lowers his eyes. Because he remembers the same moment now. The man in the worn coat sitting quietly behind everyone. The stranger who seemed to appear from nowhere. Daniel speaks again. Later the sermon asked an important question. His voice soft but clear. Would we help a stranger in need? The sentence falls into the room like a mirror. The congregation had answered that question earlier. Loudly, confidently. Amen. Now no one speaks. Because the answer has already been revealed. Daniel lifts one of the coins slightly between his fingers. Earlier today, I placed these in the offering plate. The metal catches a beam of colored light from the stained glass window. Two simple coins. Small. Almost worthless. Yet they carry the weight of an entire morning. Daniel sets the coin back on the podium. I walked into the fellowship hall afterward. His eyes move slowly across the room again, searching not for guilt, but for understanding. I approached several tables. He pauses again. The silence grows heavier. Each pause gives memory time to return. Sorry, these seats are taken. We are saving that chair. Someone else is sitting here. Daniel does not repeat the phrases aloud. He does not need to. The congregation hears them anyway, because they spoke them, or watched them, or ignored them. Finally, Daniel says quietly, I found a place to sit alone. In the middle rows a man wipes his eyes. At the front, Lorraine presses her lips together tightly. Harold stares at the floor. Marcus remains still behind Daniel, unable to look up. Daniel breathes slowly. Then he continues. But something unexpected happened. His voice softened slightly. A small change in the emotional temperature of the room. Because this part of the story is different. A young woman approached my table. Daniel turns his head slightly toward the center aisle. His eyes find Sarah Bennett. She freezes in her seat. The same quiet woman who had carried 2 cups of coffee. The same woman who had chosen the empty chair. Daniel lifts his hand gently in her direction. She did. The words land softly, but the effect is immediate. All across the sanctuary, heads turn toward Sarah. She lowers her eyes quickly, her face flushed with emotion, because she had not known who he was. She had not known about wealth, about leadership, about power. She had simply seen a stranger sitting alone. Daniel speaks again. She sat down. She offered coffee. She listened. The congregation watches Sarah now, some with admiration, others with regret. Daniel continues quietly. She treated a stranger the way a church is meant to treat strangers. The sentence echoes through the sanctuary. Mirror language. The same idea spoken earlier at the lunch table. Church should be the safest place for strangers. Several people begin wiping tears from their eyes, because now every mirror moment has returned. Every judgment, every quiet rejection, every polite excuse. The story has come full circle. Daniel looks down at the 2 coins again. Then he raises his eyes. Earlier today the sermon asked a question. Would we help a stranger? He pauses one final time. The congregation waits. But no one answers, because the answer has already been lived. And everyone in the room now understands their role in that story. The beggar who walked through the doors. The billionaire who funds churches. The pastor now standing at the pulpit. All the same man. And today the church has finally seen him clearly. The sanctuary remains silent. Not the polite silence of a sermon. Not the quiet pause between songs. This silence is heavier. It settles over the room like a weight pressing gently on every shoulder. No one moves. No one whispers. Because the story they just heard was not a story. It was a mirror. At the front of the church, Daniel Hartwell still stands behind the pulpit. The 2 coins remain on the wooden surface beside him. Small. Ordinary. But no one in the room can look at them without remembering the morning. Daniel rests his hands lightly on the pulpit again. His voice remains calm, measured. Earlier today, I placed those coins in the offering. Several people shift in their seats. Not from discomfort alone, but from recognition, because they remember the man who placed them there. The man they had quietly judged. Daniel continues speaking. I did not come this morning to embarrass anyone. His eyes move slowly across the congregation. I came to see something, to reveal something. His voice softens slightly, something that sometimes hides inside churches. In the front row, Marcus Caldwell closes his eyes briefly, because he already understands what that hidden thing is. Respectability, comfort, the quiet belief that certain people belong more than others. Daniel continues. A church can become very good at welcoming people who look successful. The sentence lands gently, but its meaning spreads through the room. Daniel breathes slowly before speaking again. But a church that forgets the broken has forgotten Christ. The sanctuary absorbs the words. They move across the pews like a slow wind. Some people wipe tears from their eyes. Others stare quietly at the floor, because they recognize the truth. And truth has a strange power. It hurts first. Then it heals. Daniel steps away from the pulpit slightly. His posture remains open. I did not perform this test to shame you. The congregation listens carefully. I did it because something important was hiding in plain sight. A few people nod slowly, because they understand. The test was never about money. It was about mercy. Daniel continues quietly. And hidden things can only change once they are seen. The silence grows softer now, less heavy, more thoughtful, because the room is beginning to breathe again. For a moment no one moves. Then a chair shifts in the front row. Marcus Caldwell stands. The movement draws every eye in the sanctuary. He walks slowly toward the pulpit. His steps are slower than usual, less confident, more honest. Marcus stops beside Daniel. For several seconds he says nothing. He simply looks out across the congregation. Then he speaks quietly. Pastor Hartwell is right. His voice is steady, but emotion rests just beneath it. This morning I saw a man sitting in the back row. Marcus lowers his eyes briefly. And I did not see a brother. The confession settles across the room. Marcus continues. I saw a problem, a distraction, someone who did not fit the image we wanted to present. Marcus looks toward Daniel, then back at the congregation. For that, I am sorry. The apology is simple, but the effect is immediate. Several people begin crying openly, because once one person speaks honestly, others begin recognizing their own silence. Harold Pierce stands next. Then Lorraine. Soon others begin rising from their seats, not because anyone asked them to, but because something inside them has shifted. A quiet movement begins toward the front of the sanctuary. People walking slowly down the aisle, heads bowed, hands folded. The front of the church fills with people praying. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, together. Daniel watches the moment unfold, not with pride, but with relief. Because transformation rarely begins with celebration. It begins with humility. Across the room, Sarah Bennett remains near the back. She has not moved. Her hands rest gently on the back of the pew in front of her. She watches the people gathering at the altar. The leaders, the members, all of them standing together now. Then she notices movement beside her. Daniel has stepped down from the stage. He walks slowly through the aisle toward the back of the sanctuary. The same path he walked earlier that morning. But the atmosphere feels different now. Warmer, more open. Daniel stops beside Sarah. For a moment, neither of them speaks. The sounds of quiet prayer continue near the front of the church. Daniel finally breaks the silence. "You treated me like a person." Sarah looks at him with mild surprise. Then she shrugs gently. "I thought that is what church was for." Daniel smiles. Not a wide smile, just a small one. The kind that appears when something difficult finally begins to heal. A week later, the sanctuary fills again. Another Sunday morning. The same stained glass windows. The same wooden pews. But the room feels different. Subtle, yet unmistakable. Daniel stands near the entrance, greeting people as they arrive. Marcus stands beside him. Harold and Lorraine move through the room, welcoming visitors. The doors open again. A man steps inside slowly. His clothes are worn, his shoulders slightly hunched. He hesitates near the entrance. Because places like this can feel dangerous for someone who has been ignored too many times. The congregation notices him quickly. But something new happens. Before the man can step away, someone in the front row stands. An elderly woman gestures toward an empty seat beside her. "Please, sit here." The man hesitates. She smiles warmly. "Right here." The front row seat remains open. Not reserved. Offered. The man walks slowly down the aisle and sits beside her. No one looks away. No one hides their smile. Because the church has remembered something important. At the front of the sanctuary, Daniel watches quietly. A memory returns to him. A note once written inside his father's old Bible. He had read it many times growing up. Never trust a church that loves the rich more than the broken. Daniel watches the man in the front row. Then he looks across the congregation. People greeting one another. People welcoming strangers. Learning something new. He smiles softly, because now he knows something his father hoped would always be possible. This church is finally learning who it wants to love.